Hello everyone, this is Desocrates, and in this video we're going into the history of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Troy, the woman who had an entire war fought over her. Let's start off with her birth. In most sources, Helen is the daughter of Zeus and Leda. While in the form of a swan, Zeus, the king of gods, was being chased by an eagle. He sought shelter with Leda, and while in the form of the swan, gained her affection. Then together they mated. Leda then produced an egg from which Helen of Troy was born. One account says that Leda produced 2 eggs, one in which Castor and Pollux were born, and the other Helen and Clytemnestra were born. In the Kypria, part of a collection of ancient Greek poems, Helen was the daughter of Zeus and the goddess Nemesis. In the poem, Nemesis, like many others, did not wish to mate with Zeus. She therefore changed shape into various animals, finally becoming a goose as she attempted to escape the lust of Zeus. Zeus also transformed himself into a goose and raped Nemesis, who then produced an egg from which Helen was born. Some sources say that the egg was then brought to Leda by a shepherd who discovered it in a grove. Another says that it was dropped into her lap by Hermes. Pausanias states that in the middle of the 2nd century, the remains of an eggshell tied up in ribbons were still being suspended from the roof of a temple on the Spartan Acropolis. People believe that this was the famous egg that Helen of Troy was born from. Helen of Troy had a bit of a habit of being kidnapped, as even before Paris, 2 Athenians, one the famous hero Theseus and the other Pirithous, thought that since they were sons of gods, they should have divine wives. They pledged to help each other kidnap 2 daughters of Zeus. Theseus chose Helen. Pirithous rather stupidly vowed to marry Persephone, the wife of Hades. Theseus took Helen when she was still very young and left her with his mother until she was old enough to marry. The 2 heroes then travelled to the underworld to kidnap Persephone. While the 2 were in the underworld, the brothers of Helen invaded Athens to return her to Sparta. They also captured Theseus' mother as revenge. Helen of Troy had many suitors before she found her husband. When it was time for her to marry, many kings and princes from around the world came to seek her hand in marriage. Some sent emissaries to do so on their behalf, and most of the suitors brought expensive gifts with them. Castor and Pollux had a prominent role in dealing with the suitors, but the final decision was in the hands of a man named Tyndareus. Her future husband Menelaus didn't actually attend, but instead sent his brother Agamemnon to represent him. Tyndareus was afraid to select a husband for Helen or to send any of the suitors away, as he feared offending them and didn't want to give them a reason to cause issues. Odysseus was also one of the suitors, but had brought no gifts because he believed he had little chance to win the contest. Because of this, he promised to Tyndareus that he would solve the problem if Tyndareus in turn would support him in his courting of Penelope, the daughter of Icarius. Tyndareus agreed, and so Odysseus proposed that before the decision is made, all the suitors should have to swear a solemn oath to defend the chosen husband against whoever should quarrel with him. Once they had sworn to not retaliate, Menelaus was chosen to be Helen's husband. To show the importance of the pact, Tyndareus sacrificed a horse. Helen and Menelaus then became the rulers of Sparta. They ruled for at least 10 years and together had a daughter. Now we get to the abduction by Paris. For those that don't know, Paris was a Trojan prince. He came to Sparta to claim Helen as his own, all in the guise of a diplomatic mission. Before this journey, Paris had been appointed by Zeus to judge the most beautiful goddess, Hera, Athena, or the goddess of beauty, Aphrodite. This event was known as the Judgment of Paris, which is a short enough story, so I'll go into it now. Zeus held a banquet in celebration of the marriage between Peleus and Thetis, the parents of Achilles. The goddess of discord Eris was not invited for it, as it was believed that she would have made the party unpleasant for everyone. Angered by this, Eris came to the celebration anyway with a golden apple, which she threw into the event as a prize of beauty. The 3 goddesses Hera, Athena and Aphrodite claimed the apple. They asked Zeus to judge which one of them was the most beautiful. Zeus, being reluctant to favour any himself, declared that Paris, the Trojan mortal, would judge their cases. Paris had recently shown his fairness in a contest in which Ares, in the form of a bull, had bested Paris' own prized bull. Paris, without hesitation, awarded the prize to Ares. With Hermes as their guide, the 3 candidates bathed in the spring of Ida, and then met with Paris on Mount Ida. After Paris failed to judge their beauty with their clothing on, the 3 goddesses stripped naked to convince him of their worthiness. While Paris was inspecting the naked goddesses, each attempted to bribe him with their powers. Hera offered to make him king of Europe and Asia. Athena offered wisdom and skill in war. Aphrodite offered Paris the world's most beautiful woman. This, of course, was Helen, who was now married to Menelaus. Paris didn't want the power that the other 2 offered, and so accepted Aphrodite's gift and awarded the apple to her, therefore receiving Helen as well as the hatred of the Greeks and especially of Hera. The sources on how Paris got Helen to come with him are a bit conflicting. Herodotus states that Helen was kidnapped by Paris, but the Kypria simply mentions that after giving Helen gifts, Aphrodite brings the two together. Another author says that Helen willingly left behind Menelaus and their 9-year-old daughter in order to be with Paris. The following is a quote from that author. Some say a host of horsemen, others of infantry and others of ships is the most beautiful thing on the dark earth, but I say it is what you love. Full easy it is to make this understood of one and all. For she that far surpassed all mortals in beauty, Helen her most noble husband, deserted, and went sailing to Troy with never a thought for her daughter and dear parents. At least 3 ancient Greek authors denied that Helen ever went to Troy. Instead, they said that Helen stayed in Egypt during the duration of the Trojan War. In one of these versions, Zeus asked Hera to fashion a likeness of Helen made out of clouds. Hermes then took this likeness of Helen to Egypt, where she spent the entire duration of the Trojan War. Herodotus adds his own evidence to the Egyptian version of events by travelling to Egypt and interviewing some priests at the temple. According to the priest, Helen had arrived in Egypt shortly after leaving Sparta because strong winds had blown Paris' ship off course. King Proteus of Egypt, being appalled that Paris had seduced his host's wife, would not allow him to take Helen to Troy. Paris then returned to Troy without Helen, but the Greeks refused to believe that Helen was in Egypt and not within Troy's walls. You would have thought they could have checked. In this version of the story, Helen waited in Egypt for 10 years while the Greeks and Trojans fought. At the end of the war, Menelaus sailed to Egypt where King Proteus reunited him with Helen. Now on to the more commonly known story of where Helen is in Troy. When Menelaus discovered that his wife was missing, he called upon all other suitors to fulfill their oaths, therefore beginning the Trojan War. The Greek fleet had gathered, but the ships could not sail there for there was a lack of wind. Artemis was enraged by sacrilege and only the sacrifice of Agamemnon's daughter could appease her. Helen's sister Clytemnestra begs her husband to reconsider this decision, calling Helen a wicked woman. Clytemnestra tries to warn her husband that sacrificing their daughter for Helen's sake is buying what we most detest with what we hold most dear. Before the war officially began, the Greeks were said to have dispatched a delegation to the Trojans under Odysseus and Menelaus. They tried without success to persuade Priam to hand Helen back. According to Homer, Helen was filled with self-loathing and regret for what she had caused. By the end of the war, the Trojans had come to hate her. When Hector dies, she is the third mourner at his funeral, and she says that of all the Trojans, Hector and Priam alone were always kind to her. The following is a quote from Helen in the Iliad. "Wherefore I wail alike for thee, and for my hapless self with grief at heart. For no longer have I anyone beside in broad Troy that is gentle to me or kind, but all men shudder at me." Helen gradually realised Paris' weaknesses and decided to ally herself with his brother Hector, who she started to have an affectionate relationship with. Helen also has some more harsh words for Paris when she compares him to Hector. "Howbeit, seeing the gods thus ordained these ills, would that I have been wife to a better man, that could feel the indignation of his fellows and their many revellings. But come now, enter in and sit thee upon this chair, my brother, since above all others has trouble encompassed thy heart, because of shameless me and the folly of Alexander." During the fall of Troy, when Menelaus finally found Helen, he raised his sword to kill her. He demanded that only he should slay his unfaithful wife. But when he was ready to do so, Helen dropped her robe from her shoulders, and the sight of her beauty caused him to let the sword drop from his hand. After the fall of Troy, Helen returned to Sparta and lived once again with Menelaus, where she is also mentioned in the Odyssey. As shown in that account, she and Menelaus were completely reconciled and had a happy married life. Menelaus held no grudge at her for running away with a lover, and Helen felt no restraint in telling stories of her life inside Troy. If you enjoyed watching, then remember to subscribe to my channel and to leave this video a like. More videos like this will be coming out soon. Let me know your opinions about Helen of Troy in the comments below.